I also think you actually have to be more flexible timing wise with a co-authored work.
I would say Maddie and I don't save any time by co-authoring a book.
Hi, and welcome to the Story Rebel Masterclass. Today we're going to be talking about co-writing nonfiction books with Matty Dalrymple and Michael Ronn. So we did have a few audience questions that I wanted to jump to. One of which, since we were talking a little bit about the timeline and passing books back and forth and working on different projects concurrently, somebody wanted to know, how much time do you save by co-writing a book? And you're
I'll
both
take that
laughing.
one. Yeah, I'll take that one. So we've talked about this. We talk about it in our book too. If you're getting into co-authoring because you think that it will save you time and effort, co-authoring is not for you. I would say Maddie and I don't save any time by co-authoring a book. In fact, I think a lot of the books that we write, probably we could very easily write that same book by ourselves a lot faster. I think really co-authoring is more of a mind meld, and it's about like it. Okay, so if I wrote a book about speaking, right? I could write a book about speaking, no problem, but it wouldn't have the same nuance in a lot of Maddie's contributions, right? And so it's really a mind meld. So you're really not saving time. I would think about it more as you are addressing a problem from more perspectives than you could do just by yourself. And I think that in and of itself is worth the extra time and effort that it would take to be able to collaborate a novel. Yeah, are there some people out there that maybe they can write faster because they divide the labor up a little bit differently than Maddie and I do? Maybe one person's in charge of the writing, another person's in charge of the marketing, and so maybe it's easier that way. Yeah, I think there are certain personality types that could work together to save time, in writing a book. But I just don't think that is that is the main reason why I would do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think you actually have to be more flexible timing wise with a co-authored work because, over the course of 2+ co-authored works, Michael and I have both encountered periods of time where we thought we were going to be able to be working on the book and we couldn't. At one point, we had a big flood in my house and there wasn't a lot of work getting done. And so I think you have to go into it realizing that even if you're both, giving it your best shot, there are just going to be things that come up that are going to mess with any ideal scenario. And so you're dealing not only with your own set of those things, but the other person's set of those things as well. So you have to be flexible in that sense.
That was certainly my experience as well when I was co-writing a fiction book. It did not take less time for sure, because there's so much back and forth and there's so much waiting on someone else's schedule and yeah, but it's a very rewarding process.
Yeah, and only thing I would add is that you're also tapping into cross-promotional opportunities.
Mhm.
So if I write a book on speaking, then I'm going to be marketing it to my audience. But if I write a book on speaking with Michael, we're going to be marketing it to both our audiences, and that's a really nice benefit.
Maddie, can you elaborate a little bit more on some of the marketing opportunities and just the ways that marketing a co-written book is different than something you wrote yourself?
I don't know that I'm bringing a lot of differences to uh, solo nonfiction books versus co-authored nonfiction books. It is more tapping into that ability to reach two sets of audiences. So, for example, for many years, each month I put one of my novels on sale for 99 cents, and I have a whole set of promotions related to that for that month. And I've started doing that with my nonfiction books as well. So I cycle through each month. I'm focusing on one, and this month happened to be conveniently enough Collaborate to Create. And so I've pulled out a bunch of tips. I pull out like 31 tips from the book, and I publish those on social media. I'm using a social media posting tool, so they're going out to Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and X and Threads and Mastodon and others. And then I'll flag Michael in there. So he'll see that and, he can share that out with his audience. I think finding ways to just alert his audience that is out there and would be of interest to them because they're followers of Michael is useful. So that has been more my focus, has been doing the same things, but making it easy for the other person to participate in them.
Yeah, and Matty is definitely more on social media than I am. I'm really not big on social media. I prefer like YouTube and newsletter and other avenues, and so it is helpful to be able to have that as well.
Another audience question that I had, actually several people asked a variation on this question, and I noticed you got asked it in the presentation you did for Authors Guild as well, which is what happens when things go disastrously wrong, which obviously has not happened to you, but I wonder if you have some advice for people where things might be going sideways.
So I think that if you follow the advice we gave about signing a contract and having this companion document that outlines some of your agreements, if you do the due diligence we talked about, then you greatly reduce the chance of that happening. I think there are also circumstances where it's not like something horrible has happened, like one person turns out to be a thief or something like that, but the things just change. And so an example of that might be that, let's say one person gets a day job. You were both writing full time, but then one person gets a 9 to 5 job and they just don't have the time to invest in the continued marketing, let's say. So at that point, you might say, well, now it's time for an upgrade to the contract, because if person A, who's still really focused on this, is going to be doing most of the promotion and admin and all those other things, then maybe they deserve more of the royalties than the person who's kind of sitting back and now just, passively accepting the royalties. So now maybe the split is 60-40 or 70-30 or something like that. So I think some things that one's first response might be, oh my God, can be addressed in ways that aren't traumatic. Those are some of the happier scenarios. Michael, do you want to delve into some others, or do you want to speculate about the more dire circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one is a relatively innocuous one. I think what's more common is when there is just a difference of direction, right? Where one person just wants to go a different direction with their career than the other person. Maybe, there's some sort of controversy or scandal or, who knows, right? That's just what I would say is that you can prevent a lot of this by in your contract specifying what happens if you just both disagree or both just want to walk away, or if one person wants to walk away, what happens, right? Or if there's some sort of a weird thing that pops up, what do you do? And if you lay that out in the contract, if you say, okay, well, what happens if one person wants to unpublish the book, right? Or one person just doesn't want their name on it anymore. Like say Matty, robs a bakery one day and I don't want to be associated with her. So, what happens? Do I just take my name off of the book and do I still receive the royalties? Do we unpublish the book? These things can be resolved if you just think them through a little bit. But you're not going to be able to come up with every potential scenario. So you just want to build in something like a kill switch. Like what happens if both of you want to walk away? And having that in writing just makes it so much easier, because then if, you don't have to spend the time and resources, heaven forbid, going to a lawyer, or a mediator or something like that. It just makes your life a lot easier. And I know some people have a hard time hearing this because they think to themselves, well, I don't want to think through that. That stresses me out. But it's less stressful to think about it up front and put it in the contract than it is to deal with it at the time when you have to figure out. Because here's what happens. If you publish a book and you're not selling very many copies, probably not going to be the end of the world if you have a disagreement about direction. The problem is what happens when you publish something or you collaborate on something that is wildly successful, and then you have a difference of direction. That's the sort of scenario that you want to be prepared for.
Yeah, that's great advice. To wrap things up, I just wanted to ask, do either of you have a final piece of advice for anyone who's considering co-writing a book? And Michael, why don't you start?
Yeah, I would say, my final piece of advice would be to follow your gut. Generally you have within a conversation with somebody, your gut is probably giving you a lot of information about what it would be like to work with that person. And it's always a good idea to follow your gut. And that is probably true. It's true of every collaboration I've worked at. I know that when I talked to Matty a few times and we talked about writing the book, right, where she suggested, hey, we should write a book about that, I felt really comfortable with Matty, right? And we've had a great working relationship. Same thing with Justin, right? And so I probably would want to collaborate with someone in the future, probably on fiction. And if I'm interviewing somebody and having a conversation about a collaboration, I want to feel comfortable with that person. And so I think your gut will tell you a lot about potential red flags. And that would be my advice. Matty?
Yeah, I think that the idea of just continuing to check in, like don't let the book go out and then you never see each other again. Because I do think that these opportunities come up that if you're not having some sort of regular check-in, that could just be an email or something like that, then it just trickles to the back burner, mixing metaphors, but it falls off your radar and you may be missing opportunities. So I think just having a chance every month, every quarter, like every year, whatever makes sense, and check in and say, hey, are there more audiences we can be reaching this with? Is there another approach we should be using for marketing? Is it time for a second edition? I mean, Mark and I found that with taking the short tack that I saw a review saying that some of the examples we were using were sort of dated. And so I looked through the book and I was like, yeah, it's been 5 years, son of a gun. Some of those are pretty dated. And so, Mark and I decided that we were going to embark on a second edition. I think just continuing to care for that in the same way that I hope everyone's caring for their own solo authored work is important.
Well, awesome. Thank you both. This has been incredibly helpful, very thought-provoking. So I hope people have gotten a lot out of this. Yeah, I just want to thank you both for coming. Again, I will drop links to your resources, your websites in the show notes, and I really appreciate it. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you for the
Thanks,
invitation.
Jesse.